A little over a week ago, a guest at Epic Universe in Orlando tragically died on the roller coaster Stardust Racers, and the ride has been shut down ever since while the park investigates. But now things are starting to ramp up because the family of the deceased have decided to hire a lawyer, and they haven't said just yet whether or not they're going to sue the park. They're saying for the time being that they just want to have answers as to what happened to their loved one. And to me, that seems kind of understandable, but it definitely looks like there's going to be a lawsuit for Universal down the road. But before we get into all this, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you can, leave a comment and hit the like button too, because it helps me out. As Stardust Racers' death investigation continues, a new lawsuit against Universal looms. This is coming from that park place. As the investigation into the man's death after riding Stardust Racers at Epic Universe continues, the threat of a new lawsuit against Universal looms in the distance. The family of Kevin Rodriguez Zavala, the 32-year-old man who was found unresponsive after riding Stardust Racers at Epic Universe on Wednesday, September 17, 2025, and later pronounced dead at the hospital, has retained legal counsel and is demanding answers. Now, to me, that seems pretty much understandable. If you have a loved one who died at a theme park, then you would want to know exactly what happened and if it was something that could have been prevented or if it was just a freak accident that no one could have ever foreseen coming and there's nothing that could have been done in order to prevent that. Now, when I first heard about this story, just the headline saying that someone died on a roller coaster, I was thinking like, okay, was it an instance of like an old person and they had a heart attack? But then I look into it and it's like, no, it's a 32-year-old guy. And then not only did he not seem to have a heart condition, but also he died from multiple blunt force trauma injuries, which to me says that, okay, there's something wrong with the ride, or there's something that happened that shouldn't have happened if a person dies from blunt force trauma injuries. Now, the question to be asked is, who's at fault with this sort of thing? Is it a flaw in the ride, or did the guests do something that they weren't supposed to do? Because I've heard about stories of guests sitting up higher on a ride or standing up or something like that, and then getting hit during a roller coaster, and that's obviously the guest's fault. Now, this individual, he probably couldn't have done that himself because according to the reporting that he's paralyzed from the waist down and couldn't actually stand up. So I'm wondering if his medical condition had any factor in this whatsoever. We don't know at this time, and that's partially why this investigation is still undergoing. Attorney Ben Crump, retained by the family, is calling for full transparency from Universal. And they said the reason why they did this is because after the medical examiner ruled that the person died from multiple blunt impact injuries, that's when they thought like, okay, something obviously went wrong with this ride that caused this, and we want to know what happened with it. The family is specifically requesting the release of maintenance logs, inspection records, ride data, and video footage. Their goal is to understand the circumstances surrounding Rodriguez Zavala's death and hold all responsible parties accountable. Now, I mean, that's what they're saying right now. They just want to understand what's happening, but retaining the service of Ben Crump, to me, suggests that they're getting ready for a lawsuit and are gathering evidence, because people who don't know who Ben Crump is, he's basically he's a high profile ambulance chaser. He wouldn't take on a case like this if he doesn't think that there could be money to be made for him. So that's why he's doing this. Now, as far as the family goes, should they actually be suing for money? And I would say, yeah, definitely. Because if I had a family member who died at a theme park, you bet that I'd be suing that theme park as a result of this. Now, is it about the money specifically? I mean, partially. I mean, if I was to sue for money because a family member died, I mean, that's so I can get something out of it. But I mean, it's not really just that, because you obviously can't replace your loved one. What it's mostly about is punishing the theme park themselves for causing this sort of situation, because there's probably been around a couple million people who've ridden this ride since it opened last May. Now, this is the first death that we know of that happened on the ride. So maybe this is just a freak occurrence, or maybe there's something on the ride that where there's a part that wears out after so many uses that needs to be replaced, or maybe there's a flaw in the system that, in a very rare circumstances, it can cause a death, but it's something that can be fixed so it won't happen again in the future. Now, the question Universal is going to be asking themselves is, okay, if there is this once in a couple million flaw that can cause a death, how much would it cost us to fix this flaw in our ride. If they see it's a certain amount, they're like, well, I mean, if we have a death on our ride every so often or whatever, every 1 in every 2 million riders that will die on this, and we have to settle that lawsuit, if that's going to be cheaper than just repairing it anyway, then we'll just go for the settlements down the road. As a family member or for someone who does cause, who is, I would say, a victim of injuries or deaths on rides like this, I think it's your obligation to sue the park, basically to force them to understand it, like, no, it's actually worse off for you if you just keep allowing this sort of thing to happen, as opposed to just fixing it so it doesn't happen in the future. Now, I'm not saying that's what occurred here and that Universal is responsible for this. I'm just saying if they are responsible for it, you have to punish them to the point where they have to fix their error, as opposed to just letting it happen. Of course, there's also the other backlash of Universal having bad headlines as a result of this sort of thing and having the ride shut down for a long period of time while they're investigating. So there's always that to contend with too, but I'm just kind of talking strictly from like the monetary standpoint of it costs so much to fix it, it costs so much to settle it, which one's cheaper for the park? I think it should be cheaper just to fix the ride as opposed to just contending with periodic settlements from lawsuits. Rodriguez Zavala's family turned to Crump after the medical examiner ruled cause of death as multiple blunt impact injuries and the manner of death as accidental. Crump's team says their independent investigation suggests that Rodriguez Zavala suffered repeated head injuries during the ride and was unconscious for much of it. Citing witness accounts, several witnesses reported seeing him covered in blood and slumped over in his seat when the ride ended. Now, that's a new detail that wasn't in the initial reporting. The initial reporting just said that he had multiple blunt impact injuries that he died from. Now they're saying it's injuries to the head and he was covered in blood at the end of the ride, because the initial reaction, the initial reporting I saw, it basically said like, yeah, he was unresponsive when the ride stopped, so they took him to the hospital. But if he's slumped over, covered in blood, that's a little bit different than just saying he's simply unresponsive. Rodriguez Zavala did have a pre-existing spinal injury that required him to use a wheelchair and take medication. However, his family emphasized that he was an experienced theme park visitor with no medical restrictions that should have prevented him from riding Stardust Racers. Universal has stated that the ride was operating normally and that team members were performing their duties correctly at the time of the incident. So far, state investigators have agreed with those findings, though the investigation remains ongoing. So obviously, Universal is going to say we did nothing wrong here, and the state investigators so far have said that, yeah, they agree with that one, but still, we don't know. Again, it could just be a freak accident that would have caused this, and there's nothing that Universal could have done in order to prevent it. Now, realistically, there's probably going to be some type of a lawsuit, and realistically, even if Universal isn't at fault with it, they're probably going to do some type of settlement just to end everything, because if there's a lawsuit going on, then that might prevent them or get in the way of them opening the ride. So they might just settle it out of court with the family at some point down the road and then move on from this whole issue, especially if the state investigators determine that there was nothing operating wrong with the ride that resulted in this, and that it was just a freak occurrence. Like I said, there's probably been a few million people who've ridden this ride so far, and there hasn't been any deaths. But one thing that has happened is incidents that may have actually caused injuries that seem at least a little bit close to what happened here. So there's this other lawsuit, on Wednesday, September 24th, 2025, just 1 week after Rodriguez Zavala's death. Sandy Streets, represented by attorneys Nicholas Spetsas, filed a lawsuit in the Ninth Judicial Circuit Court of Florida, which oversees Osceola County. According to the complaint, Streets visited Epic Universe on April 30th, 2025 as an invited business guest while riding Stardust Racers. She alleges her head shook violently and slammed into the seat's headrest, causing permanent injuries. The suit accuses Universal of one count of negligence, citing the ride's lack of head restraints despite its high-speed twists, turns, drops, and flips. Streets is seeking at least $50,000 in damage and has requested a jury trial. So it seems like there is some overlap here, because if she's sitting in the seat and then her head's banging against the head restraint, if it's not properly padded or anything like that, or there's not a proper restraint, and that caused her injuries, then maybe that's a similar situation with Rodriguez Zavala when he died on the ride, that maybe because he didn't have his access to, or didn't have use of his legs, so he couldn't like brace himself with his feet or anything like that. It was more pronounced for him, and his head just kept hitting the seat. And maybe that is something that Universal can fix down the road, even though it is a rare occurrence that someone has a problem with it. Maybe that is something that could be fixed moving on. So I could see that being the case. Maybe down the road, they add better head restraints to their ride, better padding for it, and then just settle this lawsuit with the two parties involved with these lawsuits. But that's just what I'm thinking on the outside, just looking at this initial reporting right here before everything is really all settled. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to hit the like button and share the video out there, because it helps out with the channel. Thank you.